Greetings, friends in the Lord. Happy seeing you and being with you again on this 29th Sunday of the Ordinary Time, where the church calls us to celebrate Saint Luke because it is his feast day, and we are celebrating the 29th liturgy of the Ordinary Time, 29th Sunday, and not that of Saint Luke. So today, Isaiah is proposed to us in his prophecy at the 45th chapter, verse 1, 4, and 6. First letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 1, 1 to 5. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 22, verse 15 to 21. To drive home these three readings, I chose a theme: when God commands. In other words, when God gives his order or when God instructs. When God commands, you can give the answer, what will happen, who should act, who should not act. I have come to reflect and say, if God is truly, as John says in his revelation, in the revelation of St. John, chapter 1, verse 8, that God is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the last. That he is the first and the last, the beginning and the end. In the chapter 3, verse 7, he says that he is the one who sits and holds the key to the throne of David. When he opens, nobody can close. And when he closes, nobody can open. If that is whom he is, then it will be a mistake for him to have a rival. Somebody who is opposed to him somewhere, like in a football match, having an opponent. And it is a mistake to see the devil, Lucifer, the demons, Satan, as the rival of God. He is not. He is a disobedient child of God. So God, as the Alpha, has everything under him, including the devil. Now, the ignorance of these facts will lead us to many mixed up. And that is why Hosea says in chapter 4, verse 6, that my people perish for lack of knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge. When we are out from this lack of knowledge that leads to perishing, we now appreciate the activities, the obligations, the practices that will make us true believers or that will make us mixing up believers. And that is why today the gospel text that is presented to us is a situation where Jesus is presented with the question of whether believers in the Jewish religion, as in our days, are called by obligation to pay tax. And Jesus said, whose head is drawn on the money, on the coin, whose name is written, and they said is the head, the measure of Tiberius Caesar, and his name also. He said, give to Caesar what is for him, and give to God what belongs to him. And this statement of Jesus has led many believers of our time, whether by ignorance or by decision to remain in evil, it has led them to idolatry, sitting on the fence, or placing two legs on two different and opposing areas, worshiping God in the daytime, being the secret court in the night, worshiping God in the daytime, consulting native doctors and fetish practitioners in the night. And what does that mean? Idolatry. And they said the Bible approves of it. No. Now, for us to understand this, I would want us to go through the history of payment of tax. According to Exodus chapter 30 from verse 11 to 16, God gave Moses the law regarding payment of tax. And from the age of 20, every Jewish man is called to the payment of tax. And that tax must be in metal silver. The money must be in metal silver. Completely metal silver. It shouldn't be less. And this metal silver is corresponding to half a shekel. When you read Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 33 to 34, in the time of Nehemiah from the return from exile, Babylonian exile, you see where it was made mention of. Now, the shekel in the New Testament dates back to the biblical time when the term was used to designate the metal weight. And it gives us an idea of the temple of Jerusalem being a real bank. Now, the problem of today's gospel is that the Romans, being the lords of the Israelites who are their vassals, those conquered, submitted to payment of tax and export and import duty. The money they use in transaction, in commercial transaction, has no complete value in silver. It is beaten down, just like what happens now with the African markets. We go to China and give them the quotation and say, use what you can use to produce 100, let's take for example 100 telephone to produce 10,000 telephones, reducing the value because you want to make much profit. So in the fabrication on the coinage of this money, the Romans have their money that is about 80% value in silver. So because it is not pure, because it is not having the complete value, it is prohibited to use it for the payment of the temple tax. This is what will help us understand when Jesus said, give back to Caesar what is to Caesar and give back to God what is to God. Because in the temple there is tax paying. In the civil society where the Romans are the lords of Israelites who are the vassals, there is also payment of tax, because using the money of the Romans for transactions, you've got to pay tax for using that money. For freedom of transaction, you've got to pay a tax. And this is the sense that Jesus applies this statement of today. Now, there is another form of money that is accepted in the temple. It is the money that belongs to the Tyre and the Sidon, what we call the tetradrachma. And this money has about 90% value in silver. It is what is used, what is accepted to be used in the temple tax payment. Unfortunately, the denarius that's the Roman money that has 80% silver, being the lords, their money is what is in circulation everywhere. But the Israelites restricting this money because they want to respect the purity of God's worship, say that this money should not be used in the temple. And for us to pay the tax that is attributed to God for the upkeep of his temple, it is the shekel that is accepted, or the tetradrachma of the Tyre and Sidon that has about 90% value in silver. And this is what will help you understand when Jesus said, give to God what is to God. Give to Caesar what is to Caesar. Now, it is not an invitation to idolatry, because this statement, render or return to Caesar what is Caesar's, is so ambiguous, filled with ambivalence. It leads many people to idolatry. And people understand it to be that it is an authorization to be unfaithful. You can do this one to please the world, belong to secret societies, consult charlatans, wear charms and amulets, and when it's time to God, you go to church and pray, you commune, you do your tithe, you do collection, and you are okay. No, it is not the invitation. And what does it invite us to do? It invites us to be good citizens, paying attention, contributing our quota for the development of the common good, for the good of all, for the development of the country, and this will manifest in several ways. We can apply them in several ways. Being good citizens by participating in election, There are people who don't vote. They said already we have won. He said already we have won. You did not vote. People vote. And the person you think is the market that will lead didn't win. Because you have refused to do your own part, to play your own role, to play your own part. There are people who refuse to be part of the community meetings. There are people who even refuse to sing the national anthem of their country. These are Christians. They said it is idolatry. No. It is not idolatry. It is the respect you owe to the blood shed by the ancestors of your country to gain your freedom, to be in your land and to respect what the land says. You need to obey through these ways. It's the responsibility to love and to protect your fatherland. It's also the responsibility to participate in the development of your country. It's also your responsibility to pay your tax as an obligation. You cannot import, you cannot export, and you move freely. You cannot move from one country to another and then want to stamp your visa, and you say you will not pay. You want to obtain visa, you say you will not pay. So these are the things, the ways through which the state generates revenue. So you've got to respect these ways. This is what the gospel is calling us to, according to Jesus' response. It is not for you to go into idolatry. Now, this statement, give to Caesar what is to Caesar and to God what is to God. When it is seen as Caesar being an opposer, a rival of God, seeing the worship of God as being of the same level with allegiance paid to the state, then it becomes an invitation to go to idolatry. Since you give to God the same level of adoration and you give to Caesar the same level of respect. No. God received the adoration, the worship that we call the latria, which is reserved for him alone. Nobody, no saint, no human being, no idol receive that. It is to God alone. Now, the prohibition of the use of this denarius for the payment of the tax in the church, or let me say in the temple, because of its lesser value of having 80% in silver, not being 100 or 95 as the tetradrachma, shows that the worship of God must be a pure worship. The attributes given to God must be good attributes. That is why in the law of sacrifice and offerings, God told Moses that it must be an animal without blemish. It must be something that is pure. Then the money also that will come to the temple must be according to the value and the standard that God has predicted or that God has stipulated. Now, what it tells us is that the worship given to God is superior worship and should not be shared with any other body. Now, this phrase prohibits us from consulting idols, wearing charms and amulets to protect ourselves, belonging to societies and secret cults, carrying traditional practices that are contrary to our faith. In some areas, there is something they call initiation. They said is launching you into manhood. But ask them deeply what happens there in the bush where we are, where you go. Who officiates? A priest, a pastor, or a native doctor? You make blood sacrifice, which is again the sacrifice that Jesus has made, that everything is finished by his sacrifice, by his shedding of his blood. Now, it is prohibited to practice divination, witchcraft, necromancy. All these points are the points that are prohibited by this statement. So, giving to God what is to God and to Caesar what is to Caesar does not mean that you have to serve two gods. Give God in the day, give devil in the night. Give God in the light, give devil in the dark. No. Not using this money meant for Caesar for the payment of tax in the temple shows the sovereignty, the superiority of God. As I said, His worship is pure. He is holy. His worship should be holy. He is supreme. His worship should be supreme. We must give primacy to his service before every other thing. Speaking about God's primacy, superiority, the first reading brings it closer when God is using Cyrus, the Persian king, remember, a pagan country, to set Israel free, return from exile, Babylonian exile, when Persia, the Medes and the Persians conquered Babylon. And Cyrus said, everybody should go to his state, everybody should go his country, especially those coming from Judah, coming from Jerusalem, to go and rebuild the temple of God, the Almighty Yahweh, that is in ruin in Jerusalem. So God is using a pagan to bring his people back. That is to say, helping you to understand that God can use anybody, anything, even the devil, to bring to fulfillment whatever plan he has for his people. And I want to share with you a little story around a woman, a poor woman, an elderly woman living in a state in the United States with his poor husband. They were feeding by begging, asking for almsgiving at the train station. One day there was a lot of rain. Snow was falling. The governor of the state declared that nobody should move because it's dangerous on that day to move out. This rain started from morning to evening. This woman having nothing to eat, and they couldn't go out, had to make a prayer. And what did he say? He made a prayer. And what is in that prayer? We will hear what he said. On the other side, there was a man, a cultist, who on that same day had to make a sacrifice to renew his life, because failure to do that sacrifice will lead him to death, because the Grand Master is demanding the sacrifice. And what is the content of this sacrifice? That whomever receives the gift that is going to make, if the person has brighter future, good destiny, his future and bright future will be exchanged for this man that is already dying. But seeing that since morning there has been rain, and the governor has made a decree that nobody should leave, nobody should move out. And what does this man do? He said, let me go and try my chance, because failure to do so, I will die. He made a long journey throughout the city. He couldn't see anybody. He moved to the outskirts where probably the poor people are, but he could not succeed. Discouraged and disheartened, he started coming down. Suddenly, he saw a house, an apartment with light on. He went to the doorpost and rang the bell. A poor woman came out and said, Madam, sorry to disturb you. I am Mrs. Jones. Mr. Jones, I have come to help you, given to the fact that since morning it has been raining, and I think old people are the persons that we need to help. The woman collected the gift and said, thank you. Closing her door to go, the man asked her, but madam, you didn't ask me who sent me. The woman said, I don't need to ask you who sent you. Okay, since you insist, who sent you? And the man said, it is the devil. The woman laughed and said, okay, it is the woman said, it is the prayer answered. Because this morning I prayed and said, God of the poor and the rich, God of the old and the young, God of the strong and the weak, send the strong, the rich and the young to the poor, the old and the weak, so that they will bring them help. So having been sent by the devil and having prayed to God, and the devil sent you, that means whenever God commands, even the devil obeys. Friends, this is to tell us that God can use everybody to bring to accomplishment his plans. And St. Paul invites us today to be in full activity that is inspired by faith, inspired by hope, inspired by love. And if these three activities are on in us, these three virtues, God can send a Cyrus, send a Tiberius Caesar, even the devil, to accomplish what Paul says. Everything was for good for all those who believe in God. Until these three virtues are on in our lives, faith, hope, and charity, we will not go far in our faith, in our struggle as Christians. And Almighty God bless us, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.